Hello, folks. Jeffrey Darty, the Christian whistleblower, with you today, and with my mic turned on now. Wearing today the Unindoctrinate Yourself t-shirt. You can get that at jeffreydarty.com. That's jeffreydarty.com. Comes in different colors. So go ahead and go to jeffreydarty.com if you'd like to make that available to yourself. Just order it and we'll send it right to you. Now, we've talked about and we've shown, as I look at my notes, and I used to just speak extemporaneously, but we're talking about things that are of such depth and importance that I do want to be able to give you the exact scriptures and stay. I guess I'm using a teleprompter now when I haven't been. Helps you stay on message a little bit more. And speaking of that, I am going to be establishing a longer broadcast, at least weekly, and I will be establishing set times where I will be publishing these videos. And I'll have that news out to you as soon as possible, so you will be able to go in and know that, oh, Jeff's doing a video now, and you'll be able to watch, and you'll be able to partake like you do with your favorite TV shows, etc. So we're going to have that for you. And I will also have a longer video that will be available to those of you. I do like the longer videos. But when we last talked, we talked about the emergence of plastic Jesus. We talked about how Paul and Rome created plastic Jesus as a part of helping to save their empire, and that John, the rest of the apostles, knew nothing about the death of Jesus, knew nothing about the burial of Jesus, knew nothing about the resurrection of Jesus, knew that there was no death, burial, resurrection of Yeshua. And in fact, they met the risen Jesus and rejected him. I've proven that in other videos. I'll try to list those in the comment section below. By the time you see this video, they should be there. But it was in AD 57 in 2 Corinthians, the letter to the Corinthians, that Paul admitted that he was the first one to teach and preach about the death, the burial, and the resurrection of Jesus. And we made it very clear on yesterday's video why the baby Jesus, why the death, why the burial, why the resurrection, specifically why the crucifixion death, because it aligns Jesus with the great gods of the pantheon. And it makes Yeshua, by suppressing him, forces him into something that he was 100% against. So the question is, why did Paul wake up one day in AD 57 and decide, hey, you know what? I'm going to create plastic Jesus? Why did he just all of a sudden decide he was going to create plastic Jesus? What was it that made him decide to do so? Well, he was actually responding to from his point of view, a cataclysmic event. And it was very similar to how, when things happen today in the world of politics, you try to have the politicians try to do something to distract you. So something really big is happening over here. They're like, oh my God, look over there, look over there. And the real thing's happening here, but they're trying to tell you to look over there. So Yeshua was gone from the scene by this time. Paul was on the ascendancy, and then something happened that would have destroyed him. And you have to remember who Paul was in bed with. Paul was in bed with Nero, who was just about to ascend to the Roman throne. Paul had connections all the way up to the emperor in Rome. Paul was also in bed with the Jewish Sanhedrin, the high priest, I believe Ananias at that time. And Paul was also in bed with, and actually a family member of, King Herod. So it was, and then he was also had been given police powers and really control over Pontius Pilate. So those are not the four most gentle and patient guys. Pontius Pilate, the high priest, Ananias, the king Herod, and then Nero, and the fellow who was also emperor there, Augustus, I believe. But at any rate, Paul was in deep to some very dark dudes, and something happened that would have destroyed him, and something happened that would have caused Paul to go down. And for Paul to go down, owing those kind of guys what he owed them and dropping the ball on those kind of guys, it would have been a really, really bad scene for Paul. So Paul had to take drastic action. And it wasn't Paul alone that took the drastic action. Drastic action was taken by all of those aforementioned. It went all the way as we said before, to the seat of the emperor. And just to put it in historical context, at this time, about AD 57, only the book of James and the book of 1st and 2nd Thessalonians had been written. James came out and said, Paul's a usurper, Paul's an interloper, Paul is against us, Paul is not part of our movement, he's against our movement. And then Paul wrote back and said, yeah, they're right, I am against their movement because they're right, they're wrong, and I'm right. And you don't know this because you haven't ever read the New Testament in its correct chronological order. But what was the event? Well, let's take a look at that event. We're going to take a look at that event in Revelation chapter 2, and it's actually Revelation chapter 2, and it is verse number 2. And I show you this so I can help you get an idea of how to study the Bible, and also because you wouldn't believe me if I didn't tell you what these things were. Yeshua speaking to the Ephesian church, and he says this, he says, I know your works, I know your patience, I know you cannot bear them that are evil, and you have tried them which say they are apostles and are not, and has found them to be liars. Do you know who founded the Ephesian church? Do you know who the apostle was to the Ephesian church? It was Paul himself. I've proven this exclusively, extensively before, and I will show it to you again. I'll put it in the comments below. But Paul was put on trial by the Ephesian church, and he was found to be evil, and he was rejected. If you remember, he said to Timothy, everyone in Asia has rejected me. Well, let's show you something right here. If you go up to up here and just put all that are in Asia have abandoned me. You see it right there? All who are in Asia have abandoned me. And it comes up here for Bible Hub, so I just click on that. Bam, here we go again. All those that are in Asia have deserted me, have abandoned me. It gives it to you in different versions. Guess where Ephesus was? It was in Asia, and it was the only church that Paul ever founded in Asia. So that's the great event that happened to Paul. He was found to be a false apostle by a tribunal held in Ephesus, and believe it or not, I've shown to you in my book, Apostle Paul Antichrist, on Coast to Coast AM, and also in other videos, that the judge in that trial was none other than the Apostle John. So Paul was in deep trouble. He was about to be taken down. The original Yeshua movement was about to take him out, but unfortunately, it wasn't like it is today. And Paul had plenty of time because, remember, news moved at the speed of a camel. And Paul was aligned with all of the controlling entities, from Rome to the Jewish royalty, to the Jewish priest, and right down to the police authority of Pontius Pilate. So he was able to control the dissemination of news. And what he did, he was able to create plastic Jesus, thereby suppressing Yeshua. And remember, this is AD 57, AD 60-ish. What they actually did was destroyed the original Yeshua movement. How they do that? Well, the original Yeshua movement was almost exclusively confined to the city of Jerusalem. They owned the city of Jerusalem. Paul couldn't even preach there anymore without getting shouted down. And what happened in AD 70? Well, the Roman army came in, destroyed the city of Jerusalem, pulled apart the blocks of the temple, plowed the place where it was, completely, totally. Over 1 million people died. And that would have been it for the original Yeshua movement if James and Peter hadn't had the foresight to get some of their teachings outside the walls before that happened, into the caves of Qumran, writings that would come to be known to us as the Dead Sea Scrolls. And the other thing that Paul didn't count on was he motivated John to write. John had never written a word. It was even after being the judge in the trial in Ephesus around 57 to 65, he didn't write. Even when he saw the incredible things about Paul come out, he didn't write. Even when Jerusalem was destroyed, he didn't write. But as he was getting older and as he sat there knowing he was the final apostle, the last apostle, he sat down and began to write. 40, 50 years after all of his fellow apostles had written, 20 to 30 years after Paul had finished writing, John sat down and wrote the final message of the last apostle. That was the Gospel of John. That was his epistles, 1st, 2nd, 3rd John, and the book of Revelation. And really, that's where the message of the Christian whistleblower comes from. That's the bulk of our writings. We're bringing you the very final message of the last apostle. And you can see why, you can see how, you can see things fall together, and you can see that you've been duped. And you can see that things make more sense, that things fall together, that you feel better, that guilt falls away, that you realize that you've got divinity within, not original sin. And when you begin to realize everything works better, everything fits better, historically, contextually, biblically, everything we know, everything we feel, everything we are gets better when you unindoctrinate yourself.